U.S. President Donald Trump is warning of an economic and national security disaster if the Supreme Court overturns its use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs on nearly every country. Speaking Monday, Trump claimed the tariffs have generated trillions in tariff and investment income.
The numbers were reported so incorrectly. The real numbers are trillions of dollars have been taken in or gotten in terms of investment from the tariffs.
Trump had previously floated the idea of using tariff revenues to pay for what he calls a dividend to lower-earning Americans, and repeated his plans on Monday.
We're going to issue a dividend to our middle-income people and lower-income people of about $2,000, and we're going to use the remaining tariffs to lower our debt.
During last week's oral arguments on the tariff case, Supreme Court justices cast doubt on Trump's authority to impose tariffs under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which contains no references to tariffs. Justice Amy Coney Barrett suggested it could be a mess for the courts to administer refunds to U.S. importers who have paid tariffs that were declared illegal. Trump took issue with media reports about the amount of duties collected that the government might have to repay.
Okay, so this just happened. The Supreme Court just stripped Trump of his immunity, and I'm not talking about some technical legal maneuver that doesn't matter. I'm talking about the Supreme Court saying Trump can be prosecuted like any other citizen for crimes unrelated to his core presidential duties. Criminal trials are moving forward. Right now, this is massive. The same court that gave Trump sweeping executive powers just months ago, they just turned around and said, yeah, but you're not immune from prosecution. You can't hide behind the presidency forever. And Trump's legal team, they're reportedly stunned because they thought they had this locked down. They thought the court's earlier immunity ruling would protect Trump from everything. Federal charges, state charges, all of it. They were wrong. And now the floodgates are opening. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
The Trump administration and President Trump appeared to be in something of a full court press to try and stop the discharge petition from working. Sources are telling CNN that top Trump administration officials held a meeting on this issue, not just at the White House, but in the Situation Room. Now, according to multiple sources, the meeting was said to have included the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado. Boebert is one of the 4 Republican members of the House who has signed the petition.
Here's what happened. The Supreme Court took up an emergency fast-track review, which, by the way, is becoming their favorite way to handle Trump cases lately. No waiting for the normal process. Just rush it through and drop a ruling. And this time, the vote was 5-4. That's how close this was. One vote different, and Trump walks away protected. But 5 justices said no. Presidential immunity does not shield you from criminal prosecution for actions outside your core constitutional authority. That's the key phrase, core constitutional authority, because the court is basically drawing a line. If you're doing presidential stuff, making executive decisions, conducting foreign policy, managing the executive branch, you've got immunity. But if you're doing private stuff, personal stuff, stuff that has nothing to do with being president, you're on your own. And that opens the door to prosecuting Trump for a whole lot of things. And it's not just the Supreme Court. Lower courts are piling on too. Judge Juan Merchan in New York just issued a historic opinion saying Trump must face trial and sentencing if convicted. No special protection, no delays, no immunity shield. Merchan literally said immunity cannot be used to evade justice for private acts. And legal experts are saying this is a game changer. One expert put it like this, and I'm paraphrasing. The Supreme Court is saying you can't weaponize this protection to avoid prosecution for crimes. Trump's use of immunity as a shield is over. Think about what that means. For years, Trump's entire legal strategy has been delay, claim immunity, appeal everything, run out the clock, hope you win an election, or get a friendly judge, or the public loses interest. And it's worked. He's avoided consequences for years, but that strategy just collapsed because the Supreme Court said the thing Trump was counting on doesn't exist. Not for private criminal acts, not for things he did outside his role as president. So what charges are we talking about? Well, there's the election interference case, the one about trying to overturn the 2020 results. There's the obstruction charges, the classified documents case, the state charges in New York, the state charges in Georgia. All of these cases have been stuck in legal limbo while Trump fought the immunity battle. And now, they're all moving forward. Prosecutors are scheduling trials. Judges are setting dates. Witnesses are being called. This is actually happening. And Trump, he's facing the possibility of being convicted while running for president, or being sentenced while serving as president if he wins. We're in completely uncharted territory here. Nobody knows how this plays out, because we've never had a president facing multiple criminal trials while trying to govern, or campaign, or whatever Trump ends up doing. And the political ramifications, they're insane. Democrats are celebrating this as a victory for accountability. They're saying, see, no one is above the law, not even a president, not even Trump. Justice is finally being served. But Trump allies, they're going in the opposite direction. They're calling this a deep state conspiracy, political persecution, weaponization of the justice system. Steve Bannon is already on his podcast saying this is proof the establishment is trying to destroy Trump. Roger Stone is calling for protests. Trump's most loyal supporters are rallying around him harder than ever, because from their perspective, this isn't about justice. This is about taking down their guy by any means necessary. So we're not talking about this bringing the country together. We're talking about this driving the country even further apart. Protests are already being planned on both sides. Democrats want to show support for the rule of law. Trump supporters want to show they're not backing down, and it's all going to get very loud and very messy very fast. But here's what's really wild about this. The Supreme Court gave Trump massive executive powers in their last major ruling. They said he basically has unchecked authority over the executive branch. Courts can't stop him. Congress can't investigate him. He's got more power than any president in modern history. And now, the same court is saying, but you can still be prosecuted for crimes. So Trump has more power while he's president, but he's also more legally vulnerable than any president we've ever seen. How does that even work? How do you govern while facing multiple criminal trials? How do you make executive decisions while sitting in a courtroom? How do you campaign for re-election when you might be convicted before the election even happens? Nobody has answers to these questions because we've never been here before. This is new. This is unprecedented, and it's all happening right now in real time. So yeah, buckle up, because the next few months are going to be absolutely wild. Trump's criminal trials are starting. The legal battles are intensifying. The political consequences are massive, and we're all watching to see if a former president actually gets convicted, if he goes to trial, if he gets sentenced, if he ends up behind bars or under house arrest or whatever happens when you convict someone who used to be the most powerful person in the world. This is history. This is the kind of thing people will be studying decades from now, and we're living through it. So let's break down what this actually means and where this goes from here. All right, let's get into the details. Because this Supreme Court ruling is complicated, and understanding it matters if you want to know what comes next. The court ruled 5-4 that Trump cannot claim presidential immunity for alleged crimes unrelated to core presidential duties. That phrase, core presidential duties, is doing a lot of work here, because the court isn't saying Trump has no immunity at all. They're saying he has immunity for official acts, things he did as president that were part of his constitutional responsibilities, but he doesn't have immunity for private acts, personal conduct, criminal behavior that had nothing to do with executing the duties of the presidency. And that distinction is what opens the door to prosecution, because prosecutors can now argue that the things Trump is charged with weren't official presidential acts. They were crimes, and the immunity shield doesn't apply. So what does that mean in practice? Well, let's look at the cases Trump is facing. First, there's the election interference case. The charges say Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election results through fraud and pressure campaigns. Now, Trump's lawyers have been arguing that everything he did was in his capacity as president. He was exercising his authority to ensure election integrity. He was fulfilling his constitutional duty to make sure the vote was accurate. But prosecutors are saying, no, that's not what happened. You weren't acting as president, you were acting as a candidate who lost and didn't want to admit it. You were trying to stay in power illegally, and the Supreme Court just said that's not protected by immunity. So this case moves forward. Jury selection could start as early as next month. Witnesses are being prepped. Evidence is being organized. This is happening. Then there's the classified documents case. Trump allegedly took classified documents when he left office and refused to return them. His lawyers argued he had the authority as president to declassify anything he wanted. But prosecutors are saying, even if that's true, and it's not clear that it is, you weren't president anymore when you took them. You were a private citizen, and private citizens can't possess classified documents, period. The Supreme Court's ruling backs that up, because possessing documents after leaving office isn't a presidential act. It's a crime, and immunity doesn't cover it. So this case is moving forward too, and the evidence here is pretty damning. There are photos of boxes stacked in bathrooms at Mar-a-Lago, text messages showing Trump's aides discussing how to hide documents from investigators, testimony from people who work for Trump saying he personally directed the obstruction. This could be the case that actually results in a conviction. And then there are the state cases. New York and Georgia both have charges pending. In New York, it's about financial fraud and falsifying business records related to hush money payments. In Georgia, it's about trying to pressure state officials to overturn the election results there. Trump's lawyers have been arguing that state courts have no jurisdiction over a president, that federal immunity protects him from state prosecution. But guess what? The Supreme Court just said immunity doesn't work that way. If you committed crimes, state courts can prosecute you. The presidency doesn't make you immune from state law, so both of those cases are moving forward. Judge Merchan in New York has already scheduled trial dates. The Georgia case is a bit more complicated because there's been some drama with the prosecutor there, but it's moving forward too. Trump could literally be on trial in multiple states at the same time, traveling from courtroom to courtroom, facing different juries, different charges, different potential sentences. Can you believe this? This is where we are. A former president facing criminal trials in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. And here's the thing, Trump's legal team was not prepared for this. They genuinely thought the Supreme Court's earlier immunity ruling would protect them. Back in July, the court ruled that presidents have broad immunity for official acts. Trump's lawyers interpreted that as, great, we're covered. Everything Trump did as president is off limits. But the court just clarified, no, that's not what we meant. Official acts are protected. Personal crimes are not. And most of what Trump is charged with falls into the personal crime category. So all those delays Trump's lawyers filed, all those immunity claims, they're done. Judges are throwing them out. The trials are proceeding. And Trump is running out of legal options to stop them. Now, let's talk about what this means politically. Because the legal stuff is only half the story. The political fallout is massive. Democrats are absolutely thrilled. They've been waiting for this moment for years. They've been saying Trump is a criminal, that he needs to face justice, that no one is above the law. And now it's actually happening. Democratic politicians are holding press conferences celebrating the rule of law. Progressive groups are organizing rallies to support the prosecutions. The Democratic base is energized in a way they haven't been since the 2020 election. They feel like finally, Trump is going to face consequences. Finally, the system is working. Finally, justice is being served. And they're ready to vote in 2026 to make sure it sticks. But Trump supporters, they see this completely differently. They think this is a witch hunt, a political persecution. The deep state trying to take down the only person who ever stood up to them. And they're rallying around Trump harder than ever. Trump's fundraising numbers went through the roof after the Supreme Court ruling was announced. His campaign sent out emails saying, they're trying to destroy me. Please donate. And his supporters responded. Millions of dollars came in within hours. His poll numbers among Republicans actually went up because his base sees this as proof that he's the victim, that he's being targeted because he's a threat to the establishment, and they want to support him even more because of it. So instead of this hurting Trump politically, it might actually help him with his core supporters. Yeah, I know that doesn't make sense, but that's where we are. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Trump is running for president again, or at least he might be, depending on how these trials go. If he gets convicted before the election, can he still run? Technically, yes. There's nothing in the Constitution that says a convicted felon can't be president. It's never been tested because we've never had a major candidate who was a convicted felon. But legally, he could run from prison if it came to that. Will voters elect him? That's the question. Some polls suggest his supporters will vote for him no matter what, even if he's convicted, even if he's in prison. They still vote for him because they think the charges are fake. But independents, moderate Republicans, they might be turned off by a conviction. So Trump's electoral chances could hinge on the timing of these trials. If he gets convicted before the primaries, he might not win the nomination. If he gets convicted after he's already the nominee, Republicans are stuck with him. If he doesn't get convicted until after the election and he wins, then what? Does the president-elect go to prison? Does he get sentenced and then pardoned by his vice president? Nobody knows. And there's another layer to this. Trump's legal problems are affecting how he governs right now. Because he's distracted, he's spending time with his lawyers instead of doing presidential work. He's focused on his legal defense instead of policy. His staff is divided between people trying to run the government and people trying to keep him out of prison. And that's making it harder for him to actually use those expanded executive powers the Supreme Court gave him. Because yeah, he's got more authority than ever, but he's also got less bandwidth than ever to use it. He's fighting legal battles on multiple fronts, and that takes time and energy and focus. So in a weird way, the Supreme Court give it and the Supreme Court take it away. They gave him power with one ruling, and they made it harder to use that power with another ruling. But let's talk about the precedent this sets, because that's the big picture here. The Supreme Court is establishing that former presidents can be prosecuted for crimes. That's never been definitively settled before. Nixon was pardoned before we found out if he could be prosecuted. Other presidents left office without facing criminal charges. So we've never tested whether a former president actually faces the same legal accountability as everyone else until now, and the court is saying, yes, they do. If you commit crimes, even as president, you can be held accountable after you leave office. And that's a big deal. That's the kind of thing that changes how future presidents behave, because now they know I can't just do whatever I want and then retire to my mansion. I might face prison time. I might get prosecuted. I need to be careful, or at least that's the theory. Whether it actually works that way in practice, we'll have to wait and see. And here's what's fascinating. Legal experts are divided on whether this is a good thing or not. Some are saying this is great. Accountability matters. No one should be above the law. This makes our democracy stronger. But others are worried. They're saying, wait, now every president is going to face prosecution after they leave office. The opposing party is going to file criminal charges just to punish their political enemies. We're going to turn into a country where presidents get arrested after their terms end. That's what happens in authoritarian countries, not democracies. So which is it? Is this accountability, or is this the beginning of political persecution becoming normal? Honestly, it depends on how it plays out. If Trump actually committed crimes and he's being held accountable, that's justice. But if this becomes a template for going after every president with criminal charges just because you don't like their policies, that's a problem. And we won't know which one it is until we see what happens next. Okay, let's break this down into clear points so you understand exactly what's happening and what it means. Point 1. The Supreme Court ruled that Trump cannot use presidential immunity to avoid criminal prosecution for private acts. This is huge. For years, Trump's entire legal strategy has been built on the idea that he's protected by immunity, that as president or as a former president, he can't be prosecuted for things he did while in office. And the court just said, nope, that's not how it works. If you committed crimes that weren't part of your official presidential duties, you can be prosecuted like anyone else. And that ruling opens the door to multiple criminal trials moving forward right now. We're talking about election interference charges, classified documents charges, state charges in New York and Georgia. All of these cases were stuck in legal limbo while Trump fought the immunity battle, and now they're all proceeding. Judges are setting trial dates. Prosecutors are preparing their cases. Witnesses are being called. This is real. This is happening. Point 2. Trump's legal team is stunned. They genuinely believe the Supreme Court's earlier immunity ruling would protect Trump from prosecution, but the court clarified that immunity only applies to official acts, not private criminal conduct, and most of what Trump is charged with falls into the category of private criminal conduct. So all those delays and appeals Trump's lawyers filed, they're being rejected. The immunity defense is dead, and Trump is running out of legal options to stop these trials. His lawyers are scrambling to come up with new strategies, but they're fighting an uphill battle. The legal walls are closing in, and for the first time, Trump is actually facing the possibility of being convicted and sentenced. Not just investigated, not just charged, actually convicted. That's a game changer. Point 3. The political impact is massive, and it's splitting the country even further. Democrats are celebrating this as a victory for accountability and the rule of law. They're saying Trump is finally facing consequences for his actions, justice is being served, no one is above the law, and they're energized heading into the 2026 midterms. But Trump supporters see this completely differently. They think this is a political hit job, the deep state trying to take down their guy. And instead of abandoning Trump, they're rallying around him harder. His fundraising is through the roof. His poll numbers among Republicans are going up. His base is more committed than ever. So this isn't bringing the country together. It's driving us further apart. And is setting up the 2026 midterms to be even more intense and divisive than anyone expected. Both sides see this as an existential fight. Democrats think they're defending democracy. Republicans think they're defending Trump from persecution, and neither side is listening to the other. Point 4. The timing of these trials could determine the outcome of the next election. If Trump gets convicted before the primaries, he might not win the Republican nomination. Some voters, especially independents and moderate Republicans, might decide they can't support a convicted felon. But if he gets convicted after he's already the nominee, Republicans are stuck with him. And if he doesn't get convicted until after the election and he wins, we're in completely uncharted territory. Can a president-elect serve from prison? Does he get sentenced and then pardoned? Does the vice president take over? Nobody knows. We've never been here before. So the timing of these trials and verdicts matters enormously. Prosecutors are moving as fast as they can. Trump's lawyers are trying to delay as long as possible. And the judges in the middle are trying to balance speed with fairness. It's a high-stakes legal chess game playing out in real time. Point 5. This sets a major precedent for presidential accountability. The Supreme Court is establishing that former presidents can be criminally prosecuted for actions that weren't part of their official duties. That's never been definitively settled before, and it's a big deal because it means future presidents know they can't just do whatever they want and then retire without consequences. They might face prison time. They might get prosecuted. They need to be careful about breaking the law, or at least that's the theory. Whether it actually works that way, we'll see. But the precedent is set, and that changes the calculus for everyone who holds the office going forward. Some legal experts think this is great. Accountability matters. No one should be above the law. This strengthens democracy, but others are worried. They say this could lead to political prosecutions becoming normal. Every president facing criminal charges after they leave office just because the other party wants revenge, and that would turn us into a country where the legal system is weaponized for political purposes. So which is it? Is this accountability or persecution? Honestly, it depends on what happens next and how this precedent gets used in the future. Point 6. Trump's ability to govern is being affected by his legal problems. He's spending enormous amounts of time with his lawyers. He's distracted by court appearances and legal strategy meetings. His staff is divided between people trying to run the government and people trying to keep him out of prison. And that's making it harder for him to actually use the expanded executive powers the Supreme Court gave him in their earlier ruling. So in a weird way, he's got more authority than any president in modern history, but less capacity to use it because he's fighting for his freedom. It's a strange situation, and it's affecting everything from policy decisions to appointments to his ability to focus on governance. His administration is increasingly chaotic, and these legal battles are a big reason why. Point 7. The country is watching to see if a former president actually gets convicted, because if Trump gets convicted in one of these trials, that's historic. That's never happened before, and it would send shockwaves through American politics. It would prove that the system can hold powerful people accountable, or depending on your perspective, it would prove that the system can be used to destroy political opponents. Either way, it's a moment that will define this era of American history, and we're all watching it unfold in real time. The trials are starting. The evidence is being presented. The juries will decide, and whatever they decide will have enormous consequences for Trump, for the presidency, and for the country as a whole. So where does this leave us? Well, we're entering a period of intense legal and political drama. Trump is facing multiple criminal trials. The outcomes could determine whether he goes to prison or wins re-election. The precedent being set could reshape presidential accountability forever, and the country is more divided than ever about whether this is justice or persecution. Democrats are energized. Republicans are rallying around Trump. Independents are trying to make sense of it all, and nobody knows how this ends. Will Trump be convicted? Will he be acquitted? Will the trials drag on past the election? Will he win and pardon himself? Will he lose and face sentencing? There are so many possible outcomes, and all of them would be historic. So yeah, stay tuned, because the next few months are going to be absolutely wild. The Supreme Court just changed the game. Trump's immunity shield is gone. The trials are beginning, and American democracy is being tested in ways we've never seen before. This is history happening right now, and we're all part of it.